As we get ready to go into week 2 of bad advice, we've been just talking about some really bad advice. Like if you want to really mess up your year, we've got some bad advice for you. So last week, we kicked off that series, and we said that the best way to kick off your year the wrong way is to drift from God. And we kind of gave you some practical tips on how to do that. Today, we are talking about a piece of advice that goes like this: never take a risk. Like if you don't want to see your faith grow and you don't want to go closer to God at all, never take a risk, because God is all about the risk, and that's kind of different than the way we normally think. We think that God wants us to like play it safe and always do the safe, nice thing that good little boys and girls do, but actually God wants you to get out there and do something kind of stupid. So hopefully we can get you to do that today and lead in your faith. Now, in order to do that, we have a guest speaker. We're bringing out, in just a minute, you're going to meet Nathan Zimmerman. He actually did what I consider to do one of the more risky things. He left a great job and a great position at a great church to go and start a new church in Fruitport, Michigan, right out there in Paradise. So he's out there, it's on the western side of the state, but he's out there doing the risky thing, planting a church. And so he's going to come in just a minute and talk to us about that. Now, I want to give you a little bit of warning, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. Nathan looks almost exactly like me. And when you see him, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. And I just wanted to come out on the stage so you guys would know the difference between me and him, because you might be like, Grant looks a little bit different, but I can't quite place what that is. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute as Nathan comes out with week 2 of bad advice.
Does he come later? Why?
I can do this. I can do this. I can do this.
Want some advice? Don't ask her out. She's gonna say no. She's gonna embarrass you in front of all of her friends. How embarrassing would that be?
It's the creepiest laugh. Hey, Grant and I do look a lot alike. I think I'm just missing the beard, is what he's talking about. It's the one thing I don't have. It's too much gray in it, when I grow it out, so that's the problem. Hey, let me set the scene for you. It is the 3rd century, and the Roman Empire has grown so vast, so large, that it now requires 2 capitals. And so they decide to split the Roman Empire into an Eastern and a Western Empire in 285. Now, the Western Empire is ruled by the capital of Rome. And then in 476, the Visigoths come in and they sack Rome and they take over the Western Empire, throwing Europe into the Dark Ages. But the Eastern Empire is ruled by the capital of Byzantium, which will later become Constantinople, which today is Istanbul, and it hangs on for a long time. In fact, until the 15th century, over 1,000 years longer. And the capital of Byzantium is ruled by, in this time, Emperor Constantine XI. And here's what's interesting that happens, is that in 1452, an arms dealer comes to the Emperor Constantine and tries to sell him a cannon. Now, Orban is the man's name. He's an arms dealer, and he's built this new cannon, this exciting new arm. It's 27 feet long, so like the length almost of the stage here probably. The walls are 8-inch thick. The mouth is 30 inches in diameter. It's massive. And Constantine loves the cannon. He wants to buy it. But he goes to the treasury, and the treasury advises him it's too expensive. Not the right time to be spending money on arms. So Orban is no idiot. Orban turns around and sells the cannon to the Ottomans, who are preparing to attack the Eastern Roman Empire. And here's what happens in April of 1453. The Ottoman Empire lays siege to Constantinople with its just massive defensive walls, and nobody was ever supposed to be able to breach. The army takes their new cannon that they bought from their friend Orban and points it at one spot in the wall, and for 50 days and nights hits that one spot in the wall with their new cannon. And then on May the 29th, they finally breach the wall. The army pours in, takes over, ends the Eastern Empire of Rome, and ends the Christian control of the East at that time. because the treasurer said it was probably too expensive to buy right now, right? You ever take any bad advice that you wish you could just untake, right? You been there? Well, I'm Nathan, and it's good to be here. I'm here. I've been asked to come and give you some bad advice, which is sort of messed up, right? Like, you should be asking some questions about your leadership here. Like, you're just inviting people to come in and give us bad advice? Like, who does that? What's up with that, right? Grant, they said. They're like, that's who does that. Well, welcome to week 2 of Bad Advice, this series here at Life Bridge. We'll just take this sort of tongue-in-cheek look at, man, if you could see things from 2020, hindsight, you know, take a look at things and go, man, there are some paths I probably should not have taken. Grant mentioned I'm the teaching pastor at a church over on the west side of the state. So where you all vacation, that's where we plan a church. Super nice. And if I look familiar to some of you, it's because my first job in ministry, my first like real church, I got hired by this church who was sort of in transition. They sold a building over in Wyandotte and were meeting in the Brownstown Community Center. And then eventually became Twin Oaks Christian Church. That was I started at the Brownstown Community Center. Anybody else? Do I know any of you from the Brownstown Community Center? What's up? Yeah! That was fun. Set up, tear down every week. I get to do that again now. So good. So, hey, if you're here from that, like, family's just forever. That's how the church works, man. So you guys, you'll always be family to me. It's good to be with you guys. I've seen a bunch of you so far. Just awesome. But let me just give you some bad advice. Play it safe. Man, above all else, above everything else, always, no matter what the case, play it safe. Like, life is meant to be lived in safety. In fact, you guys should have, like, helmets and wrist guards and stuff on right now. You know, this is a bowling. There are bowling balls everywhere here. Could just drop out of the ceiling. You know, I just gave you all this irrational fear about bowling balls dropping from the ceiling now. You're never going to sit here the same. But play it safe, man. Like, right? Because history is full of people who played it safe. Right? Who sat back, didn't do anything, and that's how they made history. Isn't that how that works, right? Like, maybe you know the story of Apple. Apple is this amazing company, right? And it started with actually 3 guys. But you may know the story of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, how they started the company. It was this fateful day in 1976 where they began this massive empire of Apple. But you may not know that in the room that day was a third man, Ron Wayne. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were these 2 brilliant computer designers, and they were developing this company, but they were having trouble getting along. And so this guy named Ron was brought in to help get the company going, to help bring peace to Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak's relationships. In fact, Ron Wayne was the guy who drew up the first logo for Apple. He wrote the first manual for the Apple I. In fact, he brokered the contract that started the company, and he filed it with the county registrar. Like he is one of the biggest pieces for why Apple exists. And to do so, they gave Ron 10% of the company. When he wrote the original contract, 45% went to Jobs, 45% went to Wozniak, and then 10% went to Ron Wayne. But Ron Wayne got cold feet. 2 weeks into the company, he said, you know what, I don't think this is going to work. Jobs is a little bit too risky for me. He's spending too much capital on computers, and I don't think this is going to work. And so he backed out. He asked for his money back. He said, you can have the 10%, give me $800 for my shares. And so he sold 10% of Apple for $800. Twice more, Apple came to him and begged him, please come back, take your 10% back. We need you to get this company going. Twice more, he refused them. Today, Ron Wayne's 10% would be worth $90 billion. $90 billion. But instead, today, Ron lives in a trailer in a mobile home park in Nevada, selling coins and stamps to supplement his Social Security. If you need a play-it-safe hero, Ron Wayne's your guy. Like, he's the man right there. That's who you ought to follow and look to. Man, it's funny how, in hindsight, we can see the mistakes, you know? Like we can see, obviously, you should have stayed with the company. It's funny how we can go, like, in hindsight and say, you made a mistake there. But isn't it hard to see that in the midst of it? Like, when you're in the middle of it, you don't know if it's going to work out or not. And so how do you know what to do? And here would be my advice to you. That everything in life that matters requires risk. Everything. I mean, think about all the big moments in your life, all the highlights of your life, all of them required risk. The day you proposed, and you didn't know if she was going to say yes or no. The day you got married, you didn't know, like, is forever the right, that kid? I've never had kids, but I'm assuming that birth process is a bit of a risk, right? your journey of faith, your job, everything that you've done in life that has mattered for anything, it required risk. Everything that matters requires risk. But if you're looking for some bad advice, play it safe. Just play it safe, guys. All the great difference makers in the world sat back, played it safe, and did nothing, and that's how they had such an impact. So sit back and let the pastors do all the work. It's their job anyways. Wait for God to open all the doors. Turn all the lights green before you decide to start moving down that road. Just wait till you're older, right? God never used any young people, so you got to be doing this a long time. Wait till then. Pad the walls. Get yourself a tinfoil hat because the government is obviously listening right now. Don't leave your house. It's just a dangerous world out there. Play it safe. I'm here today because about a year ago, I was at a crossroads, and I had sort of two options in front of me. I could play it safe. I had a good job at a good place, and I could stay there and keep doing well there, or I could take the risk. So I felt like God was leading me down this path of planting a church, and man, is that an unknown quantity. Like, who does that? Who just goes like, you know what? We're going to rent a big old building, spend $100,000 in equipment, and just hope people might show up. Like, that's craziness right there, right? Or I could stay where I was. For the past almost 8 years now, I'd been a student minister and a teaching pastor at a church, a good-sized church down in Lexington, Kentucky. By all measurables, things were going well. I was seeing lots of success, and Lexington was home for my wife, and so it was just really easy and safe and comfortable to be there. But we felt like maybe God was leading, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, but it certainly wasn't going to be the comfortable path to take. Now, at the time, my wife said something, and I'm convinced she didn't mean it when she said it, but it was true. She said, if God is calling us and we don't go, the only thing we can be sure of is that we'll be miserable. So we decided to take a step in faith, to do something a little risky, to let go of the safe option and let God lead us on this great adventure that we're on right now. And I don't know what you've been told about faith, but faith isn't safe. It's not. Hebrews 11 tells us that it's impossible to please God without faith, apart from faith, right? When I think of impossible, I've got 3 boys, I think of my boys, right? If any of you have young kids or you've had young kids, right? Raising kids is impossible. It's an exercise in the impossible, right? Like, when I think of impossible, I think my 3 boys being quiet, like during the church or something like that, that's impossible, right? Or my boys going to sleep the first time I lay them down, that's impossible. Not going to happen, right? My boys, like, making it more than an hour without needing a snack lest they starve to death, that's impossible, right? My 3 boys all getting along at the same time, that's impossible. And here's how you know it's impossible. If you're a parent, here's what you know. Because when this happens, when one of these things happen, you don't go, oh, the Lord hath blessed me. What a quiver full of arrows I have. My angels have blossomed into the children of God before my eyes, right? Like, you don't say that, right? Because without fail, what you say is, you go, all right, what do they want? What's up? What do they want? You're like Cole's being nice to his little brothers. What does he want? What's the game, right? Like, you try to figure out what the game is, how they're trying to fool you, because that's what's happening, because it's impossible. But Hebrews 11:6 tells us this, that this is what's impossible. And it's impossible to please God without faith. That anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists, and he rewards those who sincerely seek him. It's impossible to please God apart from faith. Like if there is a list of all the things in the universe that are possible, pleasing God apart from faith is in some other box. But why? Why is that, right? What is happening when the writer of Hebrews tells the people that he's writing to that this is what you need, that the faith is something that you got to have right here, right? Understand that what's happening is that when the writer of Hebrews is writing to these people, the empire is ramping up persecution, throwing Christians to the lions, putting them to death by the sword. They're dying day after day. He's trying to wipe them out. And the writer's going, hey, I know there's this temptation right now to shrink back, to go, no, maybe this isn't worth it. I don't know if this whole Jesus thing is really all it's cracked up to be. If this is what's going to happen to me, and you're tempted to go, I don't know if I want this anymore. But I'm telling you, the writer's saying, this is part of the deal. You're going to need faith. It's a faith walk. You're going to have it. Don't turn back. You and I, we're not facing that's not the context for us. So when we look at Hebrews 11:6, like, what does that mean for you and I? I would ask it like this. What is it that challenges our following of Jesus, right? And I would say it's this, that for most of us, for most American Christians, it's this. It's complacency. It's comfort. It's safety, right? Like, I'm not afraid of dying for my faith, right, and for being put to death by the sword, and the only lions I'm afraid of live in Detroit. And it's just mostly that they'll never be good in my whole life. Like, not once will they be good. That's what I'm afraid of, right? Like those are the only things I'm afraid of. But nobody's coming to take my life, right? No one's coming to take my life. But following Jesus is going to ask of me to give up my comfort, to give up safe plans, and to take on some risks. And sadly, because the culture around us is saying this, because even some churches are saying this, that you don't have to choose between the two. That, you know what? You don't have to choose between serving Jesus and serving yourself. Just do what makes you feel good. Faith is trusting when the safe, when the comfortable route is easier to choose, and no one will judge you for taking it. But it's not a life lived with any faith. You probably know the stories of Peter from the Bible, particularly the one of walking on the water. One of my favorite faith stories. You know, I love that Jesus invites him out of the boat. I love that Peter, who has this big mouth, for once in his life has the guts to just back it up and actually step out. It's so cool. Which just must have messed like with his head so much, right? Can you imagine just like knowing the physics of like, I'm gonna sink, and you step out and you don't? Like, that, it's got to screw with you a little bit. And maybe this is bad exegesis, but when I read the story of Peter, and I read this account, you know what isn't that impressive to me? I don't find it particularly impressive that Jesus walks on water. I just don't. Like Jesus is a miracles guy. It's what he does, right? Like, earlier that day, he'd fed 5,000 people plus women and children. In the days that followed, shortly after, he would heal a demon-possessed girl. He'd feed 4,000 men plus women and children. Like that's just what he does, right? So walking on the water is sort of pedestrian, really. But what I love about the story, I love that he invites Peter to do it. For Peter to do the impossible, for Peter to step out and take this risk. That is what is amazing to me, because I find God is so good, but it's also so cool that he invites us to do good with him, to be part of his good. So for the past year, it's been sort of a practice of stepping out on the water for me and my family. Here today because we, 3 months ago today, planted a church over on the west side of the state called the Lakes Church. And let me introduce you to our team. So it's my family. That's my wife there, Sarah, and our 3 boys, Cole, Hudson, and Max. They're 9, 6, and 4. And I'm the teaching pastor of the church, and then Todd is the lead pastor, and this is the Ballard family. And we just kind of tag team everything, but this is Todd, not them, Todd, Cindy, and their kids, Brooke and Grady. And that's it. Like, it was the 9 of us who moved up this summer and started a church. Like, you understand how church works, right? Like, that you collectively are the bride of Christ, and that, like, your giving makes building possible, and staff, and all the ministries and missions you guys do. For us, it was just the 9 of us. Like, that's all the giving we had. And, like, our kids tithe, but they're not on online yet, and so it's, like, inconsistent. You know how that gets, right? Like, it's just, whatever allowance comes in or doesn't come in. So it was just the 9 of us. And we started this church, and it's been crazy to see how God has worked. We didn't know a single person on that side of the state, and then and we got there, and now opening weekend, we had 250 people. We had no idea where any of them came from. We were like, what in the world is happening here? Yeah. And there's still, like, just a forever long way to go. But it was such a risk to step out and leave good jobs to do that, and then to see what God has done. It's been so incredible. Let me tell you the story about how that happened. Because if you'd asked me a little over a year ago if I'd ever planted a church, I'd have told you no. I was a student minister down in Lexington and taught like once a month at our church. And I really kind of liked that role. I love students, still do. And I thought I was going to do that for a long time. My gray hair is betraying me a little bit on that. But I was like, yeah, I still really love students. And then the fall of 2016, it was my wife and I's 10-year anniversary. And we never get to go. If you're a student minister, you just don't ever go on your anniversary trip because you're married in the summer, and summer is just trips. And so we're trying to figure out what to do. And so we decided, hey, let's go to this conference, and then we can kind of use that as part of our vacation, which is so romantic. And so that's what we did. So that fall, we were going to fly out to LA, go to this conference, and then we drove up the coast and whatever. But to do that, we had to go drop our kids off at my parents' place. And so we happened to be there on a Sunday, and thought, well, let's go to church, then we can drive down to the airport and fly out to Chicago. So we do that. And the Sunday we're there, this tiny little church that I grew up in is commissioning. They're sending out 3 people from their church to go. 2 were going to plant churches, so one in India, one here in the States, and then another person was going to be a church planting person in Chile, I think, in South America somewhere. Oh, they're all the same. That's not true. They're not all the same, but I forget. So they were going there, and I was like, wow, that is so, first I was just really excited. My little home church was sending out 3 people to go do ministry, and I was really proud. And then I started to that jealousy, that regret kind of sneaks in and goes, yeah, but you're not doing that, man. You guys aren't doing that. You're a much bigger church with more resources and more people, and you're not doing it as well as this little church, right? And that started to sink in a little bit. So we fly out, we go to the church growth conference, and I guess I just didn't read the website clearly enough because it turns out it's a church planting conference. I don't know, reading's not my strength, but their contention was that church planting is the best avenue for church growth. And so we went to this conference, okay. And so we drove to the coast, and my wife and I just had this week to talk about that. We still didn't think we were going to plant a church, though. But then, a month and a half later, Todd, who worked on staff with me down in Lexington, came to me and said, hey, Cindy and I feel like we're called to go plant a church. We both feel like God is telling us to go to Michigan. I've never even been to that state, so what do you know about Michigan? And I was like, that's really weird. Okay, so we agreed to check it out together. But it was I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's God, you're going to have to push. You know what I mean? Because things are safe, things are comfortable, things are easy where they are right now. I don't have to move, I don't have to change. If you leave a church, generally it's because something's wrong, and things are right here, right now, as right as they've ever been. And so, God, if this is you, push, right? So I started to do my research because that's just the kind of person I am. I want to look at this thing from all angles first and just kind of check it out. And what I found was really compelling, right? That church plants are comprised primarily, 60 to 80%, of new converts, people who are new to Jesus. I love that, right? I found that my generation and the one beneath me is on track to be the most unchurched generation in the history of our country, and it's not even close. There's this massive move away from the church. Tom Rainer estimates that between 8,000 and 10,000 churches will close their doors this year. That means that today, on average, is the last Sunday ever for about 150 churches in the U.S. It's crazy. And somewhere between 1,000 and 4,000 churches will be planted to replace them, but it's lagging behind seriously. So the first thing I thought to do was to call a guy named Steve. Steve's parents were friends of mine when I was at Twin Oaks, Craig and Carol Larson. And so I just wanted to talk with Steve about church planting. And he told me about church plants and churches like ours in Michigan versus other states and how they're just not nearly as many. He told me about, he went to this church planting conference with a buddy of his, and Steve worked in church planting, and so this other guy, and said, all right, here's what we'll do. We'll go to this church planting conference, and there'll be just rooms full of young church planters, people wanting to go plant churches. And so I'll invite them to come plant churches in Michigan, and you go invite them to plant churches with you in Atlanta, and we'll just see who says yes the most, right? So you ask 10, I'll ask 10, we'll just see what we get. They come back together at the end of the day. The guy from Atlanta goes, yeah, I did really well. I asked 10 guys to plant churches. 9 of them said yes. Only 1 said no. How'd you do, Steve? Steve said, I asked 10 guys to come plant churches in Michigan. Not one of them said yes, right? They all said no. And for some reason, people just, they don't want to come plant churches in Michigan. And there's this real need. And he connected us with a guy named Matt. He said, you ought to talk to Matt Shantz. He works for an organization called New Churches of Christ Evangelism, and they help plant churches in Michigan. And so we did, and we started looking at what might this look like if we planted a church in Michigan. We started looking at West Michigan, and we did our demographics. We narrowed down a couple of areas that we thought might work. They were a little under-churched in that area, and one was on the west side of Grand Rapids, which was really attractive. For me anyways, I love Grand Rapids. It's kind of home for me, and It's over 1 million people now. It's this growing, cool, young city. And we thought maybe that's where we'll go. And the other area was a place called Norton Shores, which I wasn't even really sure where it was at. So we went to Grand Rapids first, and we started to look. But man, I'm telling you, we went everywhere and could not find anything. There just were no doors open for us to plant a church there. We thought maybe God doesn't want us to do this. Maybe we were wrong about stepping out and this whole church plant thing, right? In the midst of that, Matt says, hey, I got this buddy, Jim. Jim is a basketball coach, and he's just somebody I've been working on. Like, he's an atheist, and I love just for him to get to know some Christian guys who love playing ball. I know you guys like to play ball. Would you just be interested in playing ball with Jim as a way of me kind of reaching him for the gospel? And we're like, yeah, cool, it'd be great. So he connects us with Jim, and Jim says, yeah, I run this basketball camp out of this school over in Fruitport, Norton Shores, called Calvary Christian School, and I'll include the principal in this email. Maybe he'll let us come and use the gym to play ball. So we said, cool, all right. So the principal emails Todd and I back. Right, now, Calvary Christian School is a school. It's a Christian school that was planted by a church, built by a church 20 years ago to operate as a church and a school, both. So weekends it's a church, weekdays it's a Christian school, but somewhere along the line the church sort of got messed up, and then they ended up falling apart and leaving, and now it's just this Christian school. And the principal emails us back, and he says, our school board has met every week for 3 years. And every week we have prayed that God would send us a church to operate in this building, that the gospel would be preached from our stage on the weekends at the baptistry that's in the stage. It's been empty for 6 years, would need to be filled again because people want to meet Jesus in the waters. We've been praying for this for 3 years every week. We think maybe you're the answer to our prayers. I'm like, okay. Could you give us a sign, God? Like something, like anything. Man, like they rolled out the red carpet for us. They moved around their arts programs so that we could have offices. They kicked people out of their rooms so that we could have offices on site. Like they want us there. It's so cool. Now, understand, like most church plants, they rent a school or they start in some dingy strip mall or something. It's an $11 million facility on a 60-acre campus, and they just give us access to everything we want. And it's all because of an atheist named Jim who planted a church. So I said, okay, God, it's pretty clear that you have a hand in this, so we'll step out. We'll use a little faith here. We'll take the risk. And listen, I don't know where God might be calling you right now. I believe that all of us are called. I believe what Spurgeon said, that every Christian is either a missionary or an imposter. My guess, though, is that there is something safer, something more comfortable than following where God's leading. I know you probably have heard this voice whisper in your ear, like, would God really want you to do that? Like, would God call you to risk your job? Risk your relationship? Like, put your family in that position? Like, would God really? And I know that because it's the same lie that Satan has been whispering for all of eternity, for all of creation. Because in Genesis 3, when the Bible gives us the first account of sin, what is it that he says to Eve? He says, hey, would God really? Right, that's the same line he uses with Eve, and he's using it with us. Would God really? God wouldn't really call you to risk it, really call you to do that. Did God really say? So yeah, listening to God will demand of you some faith to step out on the water, but I am thrust forward by verses like this. 2 Corinthians 5 says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. Some of you are living examples of that sitting in a chair right now. The new creation has come. The old is gone, the new is here. Paul says it like this, all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ. And he gave us a job. He gave us the ministry of reconciliation, that God was reconciling, bringing the world back to him, to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And then he's done this. He's committed to you. Not to the pastors, not to church planners, he's committed to us, Christians. This ministry of reconciliation, this message of reconciliation, that we are therefore Christ's ambassadors. And so God were making his appeal through us, that we implore you, beg you, be reconciled to God. Be brought back together with your Father. And we're the ambassadors, called to give our lives to compel people, given this message, this ministry of reconciliation, and it absolutely cannot wait. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about this church planting thing is that my generation, and the generation just younger than me, on track to be the most unchurched generation in the history of our country. And I just, something inside me goes like, not on my watch, you know what I mean? Like not will I have anything to do about it. And I think the reason that so many young people are unchurched isn't because they haven't heard of Jesus. It isn't because they haven't heard of the church. I think it's because most of them have had a taste of the church, or they've been told what the church is like, and they want nothing to do with it. Gabe Lyons, in his book Unchristian, tells about the research they did, and they interviewed people who were outside of the church and asked them their opinion on the church. 87% described the church as judgmental. 85% described the church as hypocritical. Man, something's got to change. And that's a trend worth taking a risk to change, in my opinion. So what are you going to do with your life, with the opportunities that God has given you? Because Jesus tells this parable. He tells a parable about three men who work for their master. And the master leaves town, and he gives each of the three men some of the master's resources, right? And two of the men, they take the resources, they go out, and they increase them. They add to the master's wealth. They bring back more than was given to them, and the master blesses them. But one of the guys, he plays it safe, right? Play it safe. Don't risk it. And so he sits on it, just waits, returns back what the master gave him in the first place. And listen to how Jesus ends this parable. Listen to what he says about the person who played it safe. Matthew 25, but his master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own, at least with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. Take the resource, the money from him, give it to him who has more. For everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away." And then the master casts the worthless servant out into the darkness. And Jesus describes it like this: in that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Not only is choosing the safe life boring, it seems it's also a sin. To take what God has given you and to do nothing with it, to waste your life, doesn't seem very pleased with that. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy named John Knox. John Knox was a Scottish theologian and minister. And the quote is a line from one of his prayers, and he prayed this: "Give me Scotland or I die." Give me Scotland or I die. He prayed with this urgency to God: give me my people or kill me. My life is laid bare before you, that I will do whatever it takes to reach my people, or slay me, or take me home. Like, that's what I live for. And what if the people of LifeBridge had that kind of fervency about reaching downriver? Like, what if every morning this tribe of people here put their feet to the ground beneath their bed and prayed, "God, give me Taylor or I die. Give me Woodhaven or I die. Give me Southgate or I die." Like, don't you think the devil would be scared of that kind of army? That kind of faith, that kind of people who would go, just, my life is lived to reach my people. And we're praying that would be true in Fruitport and in Muskegon and Grand Haven and Norton Shores. But maybe, though, I don't know, maybe you go, why? Why would I risk it? Why would I risk my job, my relationship, my family, whatever it is, my comfort, to step out for the gospel? And I hear you, because it's scary. I've been there. But let me ask you this. What did Jesus risk to reach you? What was it that he held back in his pursuit of you? When did he go, you know what, it's just too far, it's too much to reach him, to reach her? That's too far for me. Of course not. He risked everything for me, and so I will risk everything to make him known. Because it's the person who acts that counts, right? Action trumps everything. Teddy Roosevelt says it like this: "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that this place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Church, be the one in the arena. Be the one who dares greatly. Let me do two things. Can I ask two things of you as we close? One is, would you pray for the Lakes Church? We're young. We're just 3 months old today, actually, and so we could use your prayers. But second is this, that would you dare greatly? Would you risk greatly? Because the task is far too large for any one church to handle. We need incredible churches all over this state. If we're going to reach, we're going to change some of the trends in our culture. And so would you as people, as members of this body, would you risk greatly for the gospel? Let me pray for you, and then I'll be done. Dear God, thank you for the chance to be here this morning. Thank you for old friends and friendly faces. Thank you for what you're doing through LifeBridge. And I thank you for a life of faith that's not boring, that isn't mild or tepid. There is this great task to take on, this great end to reach toward, and that you're calling us out of comfort, out of safety, but into your arms, right? There's just this incredible amount of safety that exists in the arms of Jesus, whether it's safe or not, whether it's in the area of your life you feel comfortable or not, because we don't go alone. And so I thank you for Jesus. I thank you for your Spirit. I thank you for what you have done, and pray, God, we get to see the greatness of your good deeds done in our day as well. So in your name we pray. Amen.